don't think they're good for children.
I think they're pretty neat. That's what I do in my spare time.
I don't like the idea of them staying there pumping money into them.
The industry's doing real well. Now how well the children are doing, I don't know.
We love them. The children love them. My grandchildren have them.
I don't know. I guess it's our lungs just keep them off the street and there's some places they can, be supervised somewhat.
I had a concern that I really wasn't sure what type of a draw this was going to have, not only on the other children in the community, but my own. Would they start going in, playing games there instead of doing things like reading, which I wanted them to do, their homework after school? They'd get involved playing with a lot of these games. That has not happened.
The problem is, and maybe societies haven't dealt with this properly, but what do you do with youth when they congregate? Are we saying that there are no benefits to have young people together? What kinds of alternatives are we providing for our youth today? And are we not going to possibly take just one more thing away from them?
Suddenly, coin video games are turning up all over the country, in supermarkets, barbershops, doctors' offices, bookstores, even in the jury room at the municipal courthouse in San Jose, California. Well, naturally, we have some questions. Where do these games come from? What effect do they have on the players? And what happens when they appear in our communities? To get some answers, let's go to the source. This is Sunnyvale, the heart of California's famous Silicon Valley. Coin video games were born here in Sunnyvale less than a decade ago when a small company called Atari introduced a game called Pong. Don Osborne is currently vice president of Atari's Coin Video Games division.
The microprocessor is a computer, and it's this computer technology that has been developed in conjunction with the video screen that really makes it special and very different. This is what gives intelligence to the product, and this is what we think young people are responding to. They have now a recreation forum and an entertainment forum that is allowing them in an interactive way to deal with an intelligent kind of thing. And what you essentially have is you have a cadre of very bright, young, excited, enthusiastic engineers who are programming the memories of these video games and feeding intelligence into these video games to challenge players.
It has to be easy enough for the person who's never played a video game before to walk up and play it for a sufficient length of time that he doesn't feel like he's had his quarter stolen right out of his hand. But it has to be challenging enough that the expert player can come up and play it and be challenged by it, and not be bored by it.
I'm really interested in the bizarre quality of life on Earth, but not necessarily the everyday business. I'm really, like Centipedes is sort of, and it came out sort of because I don't like spiders. That's a lot of how that happened. And the spider in that is very cartoonish and mischievous and just irritating, really. And I liked, having my way over a spider.
Well, that's what the game makers are aiming for. Color, sound, excitement. But what really happens when a player puts a quarter into a machine?
Gives you a feeling of power. You can destroy all these creepy crawly things.
It's a way to spend an evening with the family, and the cost is minimal.
You work hard at it, you try different tactics and stuff. It's just fun.
It's challenging. It always changes. It's always something different.
And I go crazy when I get on Pac-Man. You'd think I was 10 years old again.
At the University of Connecticut in Stamford, psychologist Jerry Seeholster is interested in the broader implications of video games.
I suspect it's going to take a concerted effort on the part of the kids, the parents, the game owners, the arcade owners, and perhaps even the manufacturers, sort of an educational push. It seems to me that the control of all of the problems that have been cited against games lies in the hands of the people who play them, lies in the hands of the people who offer them, the arcade owners, and certainly in the hands of the people who produce them. The impression that I get from reading a lot of the anti-video game literature is that the parents feel that these forces are out of their control, totally out of their control. It's almost as if these these games are going to steal their children from them and make them into robots or something like that. But it lies in the control of the people who are involved in them.
Since video games first began making their appearance in local communities, the same questions have been asked so many times that we now begin to see a pattern emerge of how the issue rises and how it's settled by local communities. This is Westchester County, about 25 miles up the Hudson River from New York City. The issue came up first here in the village of Irvington and then spread quickly to other communities. Now it's taken the form of a proposed video game ordinance. Some thoughts about all of this from the town supervisor, Charles DiGiacomo, who's the highest elected official in the area.
In Westchester County right now, there's probably 7 or 8 communities, towns and villages that have restrictive ordinances with regard to video games and arcades. And the towns and villages that do not have them, they're getting pressure now from various groups that they institute these types of ordinances. To me, it makes absolutely no sense at all, because I know there are very young people that use these games and middle-aged people and older people that use it. And I think that young people should be allowed to use it because it helps them with the reflexes and eye coordination. And I think it's a valuable tool for all of us, and it's a great way, I think, to get a lot of pleasure out of this type of thing. And I don't think that it should be restricted. There's nothing wrong with video games per se.
I'd like to see more concern on the part of the places that have the machines in terms of not operating them perhaps during school hours. If there is proper supervision and concern on the part of the people that own the establishment, it seems to alleviate the problems greatly.
Like many families, the Harans of Westchester County, New York, have had to take a close look at the coin video game issue.
I think parents also have a role to know where their kids are, to see what they're doing, to see who they're with. So I think that parental aspect of it also has to be taken into account.
I really like to see the games in these places because I think that our kids have so little to do, especially in the suburbs. Our kids have nothing. They have no place to go. You have to drive your kids everywhere. Everything costs money. The movies are going up. Roller skating is going up. Bowling is going up. So it's kind of nice to have a place where they can go and play you know, some games and only spend a couple of dollars. I don't want to see any more restrictions than just what's moderate and just what's good.
Amusement arcades account for part of the video game marketplace, but the fact is, at least 80% of all the machines in the country are in places like this. Benny Settembre's Pizza Parlor, Route 9A, Croton-on-Hudson, New York.
Kids that do come here, they know it's well supervised. They know that they can't hang out here. And they know that they're not going to bother any other kids here. They know they're not going to take anybody for their money. I have such a good relationship with them. They, if they're short for a slice, no problem. I do sponsor 4 or 5 softball teams. I take care of soccer teams. I take care of the town. The money that I do make from the machines adds to whatever I have to make here to stay here in business. I would resent them taking them away from me, and I think it would cause me to not to want to do anything with the town.
As a trustee in a town outside Chicago, David Rubin confronted coin video games as a parent and as a town official.
My feeling, if I were to make suggestions to other communities, would be that I think there is a certain amount of airing of the whole issue that has got to be done when it first occurs. I think that tends to diffuse some of the emotions that probably will arise when the first game shop operator decides he wants to come into the community. You obviously have got to sort of police the hours that this thing is open, close them at reasonable times so that the children aren't hanging around, that they don't have some place to go late in the evening. But short of that, I think it really comes down to how well the parents discipline their children and how they use their time. And I think there is a place for these types of games in the life of a child.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Sweeney. I'm a sergeant in the 24th Police District in the city of Chicago. Prior to the 24th District coming into the Rogers Park community here in Chicago, they had a problem with gangs. A couple of kids got injured, one got killed. But during that same week, we had our first game room open up Since that time, we haven't had another game war. Recently, the city fathers of the city of Chicago felt that it was a necessity to make it a law that you have to be under the, you have to be 18 years of age in order to even enter into a game room. It would mean that the kids would be back on the street, gangs would be out there recruiting again, and it would be just too much of a problem and a headache. So I went down to the city council and I gave testimony as to what the police department's side of the view was. City fathers decided not to enact the law after I gave my testimony and after they heard other testimony as to our side of it as far as the police department is concerned.
When we play the games here, or we go to any game room, you know, we're keeping us off the streets, and it's not like we're starting any trouble or anything, we're learning.
I noticed at the time, largely because my kids have been spending a lot of time playing arcade games, and I was trying to play them, that people develop incredible levels of expertise in playing the games.
Here on campus at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, Professor Emanuel Donchin heads up the psychology department and a research project to determine whether or not video games can be successfully used in training to develop and maintain specific skills.
We're interested in analyzing the game into its component skills and find out if there are different skills, each of which is separately trainable. It looks like we can analyze the game into its component skills. The next phase would be to find out if you train skills in one game, if you can transfer the skill that you have developed into another situation. If so, then the games can become rudimentary training devices. You can talk about pilot training, tank gunnery trainers, controllers of nuclear power plants, any kind of situation in which a human has to interact with a very, very complex machine and control it.
Dr. Harold Abelson is a scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge. He uses video games in his Project Logo.
The Logo project is a project that's been going on at MIT since about 1969. And what we've been trying to do is find effective ways to put computer power in the hands of children and all sorts of people. We found that computers can be a wonderful way to get people to explore physics by making games and having things move on the screen and understanding that. And Logo is in some sense a vision of how computers can be used to make education much more creative and take some of the real creativity that comes with working with a computer medium and putting that at the service of education.
As a school psychologist and special consultant to a Long Island, New York school district, Peter Favaro explores the potential of video games to increase understanding between parents and children.
And I've developed a manual which teaches parents how to use the games to gain access into kind of the experiential world of the child. I teach parents techniques of what they can do with children to find out what children are thinking, to find out what's going on in their fantasies, to find out what their child's issues are. Games can be used, you know, if used correctly, to facilitate communication between parents and children. It's a vehicle around which cooperative interactions can occur.
For the most part, like I said, the values that he's going to receive are those things that I'm going to teach him. And him coming to a game room is not intrinsically bad. It's not going to harm him to play a game. Personally, I don't feel like it's the responsibility of government to legislate what my kids can do and what they can't do. Being Christian people, we don't want to go any place that would give us a bad reputation or otherwise. We'd rather come to a place that's a family operation and run cleanly.
At last count, there were almost 10,000 coin video game operators across the USA. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, operator Steve Goot is helping to make a good name for coin video games.
We're out actively seeking church groups, communities, and families. We try to make ourselves unique in the fact that we recognize that problems could exist in an operation like this. We try to appeal to the community. As an example, we want that mother to bring her child here while she's shopping. We want her to feel free to drop that child off and to feel free when she comes back to walk in herself and that she won't be harassed by teenagers who are unruly. This type of operation does not allow that type of thing to happen. It is well lit. It is well supervised. We're looking to do away with the reputation that the old arcade or game room around the corner or pool hall once had. This is something we've done voluntarily. We would hope that this could be done voluntarily all over the country. It's very important that we govern our own industry.
As a manufacturer, we're going to communities. We're working with different agencies, and we're sitting down with people across the table, and we're rolling up our sleeves, and we're saying, what are the alternatives that we can together forge into some sort of an agreement, some sort of compromise position to really allow us to not only coexist in the community together, but for our industry to have a real positive, beneficial effect in the community. We want to do that.
Right now we're working with Atari and other game operators to set up some pilot programs at some of our community centers. We've got a special Youth Month program coming up in San Jose where we're focusing positive attention on young people in San Jose, and as part of this with Atari we're looking at setting up these game rooms in our community centers at different geographic places throughout the city.
Here in San Jose, California, Youth Commissioner Neil Christie gave his support to the local kids in confronting coin video game opposition before it started.
Well, the City Council directed their administration to come up with a set of guidelines, and the things they're looking at are how much supervision should be in the game room, what type of hours should there be so they don't conflict with school schedules where young people are maybe cutting school. And so they directed the city administration, the police department, and the San Jose Youth Commission, which is the youth leadership group in the city of San Jose, to jointly come up with a set of guidelines that would go back to city council. We need preventative type of programs. Let's get them into something positive instead of having to deal with them in the juvenile justice system. And I think by putting this type of program together, which is incorporating the business community as well as the government and working with young people together, I think is going to be sort of the prototype program for the future. Instead of having more juvenile jails and things like that, these are the type of things we have to do, and hopefully a lot of the other communities are going to look at that in that positive vein instead of the negative vein of what's the problem with it, instead of saying how can we use these to best serve both young people in our city and communities.
We've traveled around the country and seen how coin video games represent a computer-age challenge in human relationships that's as old as youth itself. And we've also seen how parents, businessmen, elected officials, and the players themselves are programming a response that we can live with and play with.